Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. Today, I'm joined by quite possibly the zestiest person in recruitment, the founder and
There we
managing
are.
director of Add Some Zest, Calum Lyle. Calum, great to have you on firstly. How's things going?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having you. Caught me, to be fair, 4:38 on a Tuesday, and today is like a Monday for me. Probably the least zesty I will ever be. So hopefully I can like tone it down a little bit and not be quite as zesty as I usually would be. But I'll still try and bring a little bit of zest
I
to this
wouldn't expect
conversation.
anything less. No, I'm really excited. So Calum and I, we've worked with each other. I mean, you were probably the first client I ever met when I set my business up, and you really restored the faith in the recruitment industry for me because, I've unfortunately had I've worked with some people that aren't necessarily quite as nice, and everyone that I have spoken to that has either worked with you or for you or knows of you says a very similar thing. So honestly, it's going to be an honor to do this, and really looking forward to getting into it.
Good.
So look, the conversation could go one way or another, but we wrote down a couple of topics for the viewers and listeners that we're going to run through. Obviously, we'll start off with your story in your recruitment career because it's quite an interesting one, kind of why you set Zest up, what Zest do, etc. Running a small business, there's a lot of lessons that you would have learned, and since you've started hiring people, so we'll talk through the sort of highs, lows, lessons, etc. Obviously, in your first year, you did 500k when you first set up your business, when you were off the tools for however long. So I think there's going to be a lot of value we can take away from that for listeners. Obviously, your business model being predominantly retained, we'll talk a lot about that. And as I started the show off by saying the zestiest person, you are so unapologetically yourself, so authentic. So we'll try and dive into all those types of topics. But to start things off then, Callum, for people that may not know you, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, etc.
Amazing. So yeah, thanks for that. That's very kind, some kind words, and yeah, I'll go into a bit of detail on all of that through the conversation. But ultimately, I got into recruitment. So my background way back in the day was very hospitality focused. So I studied international hospitality management and business at uni, all very focused on service. I was really lucky to kind of run high-end restaurants and kind of work in the hotel trade where I was so obsessed with service, and I'll go into some things that I don't actually often talk about. I worked with Fred Syriacs, who is now quite famous. Gordon, Gino, and Fred, kind of running around Europe and stuff. But he was maitre d' and kind of really focused on service. So grew and learned so much off of him, and then graduated from uni. My dad worked in HR. I wanted to earn a good amount of money and kind of between sales and HR picked recruitment just very randomly and kind of serendipitously. Got into a local firm, was quite good at it. Certainly was not as good as others, I don't think, for the first 6 months, but was quite good at it. And then within a year, I kind of picked it up. I would say almost purely through hard work and wanting it more than others. And then just very randomly, that was kind of about 6 people local firm at the time. The owner of that business decided to swap positions with me. And at the time, I was kind of 24, maybe 23 even, who I'd kind of been half successful in recruitment, but like how successful can you be at being pretty crap at something for 6 months and then pretty good at something for 6 months? But I was given the opportunity to switch places with the owner of that business because I kind of had hearts and minds of the team, quite popular, saw an opportunity in me or potential in me. And then over a course of 6 years, grew that team from 5 people to just shy of 30 people, met some wonderful people on the way, hired some people on the way who work for me and with me now at Zest. And ultimately, at no point of that journey, you talk about me being unapologetically myself and very authentic. When I got into recruitment, everyone thought it was like a real salesy, boiler room, aggressive sales type mindset and environment. Whereas I'm the complete opposite of that. I've always focused on service. I'm quite like flamboyant and just the complete opposite, very zesty. So I've always had that in the back of my mind. Kind of, we can talk about this in a bit more detail. I thought I wanted to earn loads of money. I was really lucky to earn lots of money. Bought myself a sports car at 25, had a lovely house, had all the things that I thought I wanted, and actually realized I wasn't very fulfilled by that. So instead decided to leave that MD position where I could have earned a very good amount of money every year to put that money into another business, ultimately with a goal to radically change recruitment or radically. Our vision at Zest launched in October 2022. Yesterday was our second birthday. Our vision at Zest is to radically change the perception of how a recruitment agency serves its people, customers, and communities. People come first in that, so our kind of staff, customers, both candidates and clients, and then communities, how we like impact people, how we make people feel is really important to me, and that's ultimately what Zest is here to accomplish. 2 years on through that journey, we can go into a bit more detail through the conversation. As you say, luckily did 500k first year through kind of sheer hard work, and talk for a bit about that. That was almost solely retained. And then second year, kind of built on that. Team is at 6 of us now, and just slowly growing, but sustainably growing. And I think I've picked a time that's been a real tricky time, as you have, to be fair, to launch a business and to work through that. So lots I've learned on that journey. Long way to go, but I'm pretty pleased with the first 2 years of that journey.
Love it. There's something that I bang on a lot about, and it's probably one of the first conversations we had, because on both of our websites it says trying to change the perception of recruitment, right? This isn't necessarily one of the topics we said we would discuss, but it's going to go into what we're going to talk about. How I know that what you're doing at Zest, and obviously I've worked with you, I know that you're doing things very differently to the average recruitment business, and obviously you're very service focused and things like that. But I mean, how do we actually change the perception of recruitment?
Uh, I think what I mean by change the perception of recruitment is, I think that's the kind of outcome. What I want to drive more into recruitment is people who are like, who want to do it for the right reasons. I think
Mm.
finding someone a job, changing position generally as a candidate is a really emotive time. It's like buying a, it's, again, you could, I don't know nothing about estate agency, by the way, but it's like buying a house. It's a really emotive time to the person who's buying a house, but actually no one really gives a shit in that process. And I kind of think the same about recruitment. Recruitment's become so focused. I remember graduating, and every job ad that you applied for earned 6 figures in the first year and have
Classic.
Rolex, Achievers Clubs, Presidents Clubs, whatever you bloody want to call them. I just don't think that's necessarily conducive to changing the perception of recruitment. I don't think that's conducive to the types of people we want to drive into the world of recruitment. I think getting someone a job is, it takes someone with a bit of credibility on the other side of the phone who actually is putting the other person's interests above theirs. I don't think that's conducive with the way that recruiters are paid, because ultimately, if you look actually at the commercial contract of a recruiter, you're there to get a bum in a seat and keep them there for 3 months. That's not what the individual is trying to do. The individual is trying to find the best job for them and stay there for 5+ years. So
Mm.
I think that's got a link with the individual, and I think that's why I want to change the perception of recruitment. Really, I think unless I'd got the lucky break, I probably would have been in recruitment for 6 months to a year, gone and done something else, and in the least arrogant way possible, I think I would have been successful doing something else.
Mm.
And I hate the fact that we lose lots of people. And a bit more context, I guess, which I didn't give in this summary of us. We recruit in the SaaS and kind of go to market sales or go to market tech type space. And I think people start their career in recruitment and then see the opportunity to be like an enterprise account exec and earn 300k somewhere else. I want to shine a light on the fact that you can be bloody good at recruitment and earn a good amount of money and
Mm.
have a really fulfilling career in recruitment. You don't need to leave to join a software business with a slide in the lobby. You can do that within recruitment, and I think that's really important. But it's changing it more into a service type industry. There's ways that you can do that. We can chat that through, and yeah, it's got to be led from the top, and it's got to be a
Mm.
behavioral thing and an attitude thing, and it can't be
Mm.
the problem with business, the problem with the world. Everything's so focused on money, money, money.
Yeah.
Actually, there does need to be a change in that
Mm.
short term in order to get the long term benefits
Yeah.
of what we want to create.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I done something similar to what you guys do. As you know, I recruited medical technology salespeople. And the difference between a medical sales rep and a medical device recruiter is if I wanted to be a medical sales rep selling anything from urine drainage bags to surgical robotics, right? You have to have a degree because obviously you're dealing with medical professions. That's one industry that I'm like, okay, get you having to have a degree. Recruitment having a degree, there's no need, in my opinion. But every single business, almost every single business, if they hired a salesperson, whether they had 0 years experience or 10 years experience, they would send them to wherever their HQ was, train them on the products, train them how to speak to customers, train them how to manage their territory, because they know that if you are going out on the road and meeting customers, the business's reputation is on the line. Because you could go along and do a really, really terrible job. And actually, in that industry, you have patients' lives on the line, right? The difference between recruitment, I got into recruitment with barely any education, just a couple of GCSEs, right? And an NVQ level 2 in sales, right? What training did I get? I didn't. I had like an operations director read from a book that was probably written in the 1990s. We watched a couple of VHSs. I'm not even that old, but we had a big boxy TV with a VHS, right? Which is crazy to think about that. But all we were taught was candidates are a big pound sign or a dollar sign, that you can't always think about them as people. You have to think they're your commodity. And that for me really it kind of it made me second guess what I was getting into, because I got into it for a similar reason to you. I got into it because I wanted to help people, which I know that's a little bit of an odd thing. And then I realized actually if you do anything really well, almost anything really well, then the money will follow, right? And it surely did in recruitment. But I think I agree with you with what you just said there, that the what people are getting into recruitment for, and someone said this, I think it was Patrick on episode 1, they just see the dollar sign, they see the deal, and that translates into the conversations they're having, and customers can tell when they're trying to be, when they feel like they're being sold to, and they feel like actually you're not trying to get me the best person, you're just trying to do a deal. And I think that's so wrong.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you. I think there's two things you said there which are really profound, really. But the number one, you're bang on. Like, if you are really good at something, and I mean really good at something,
Mm,
you will be fine for money. Like, I'm such a believer of that. But you've got to sacrifice and really focus in on being bloody good at what that is. And I think sales and recruitment have a bit of a stigma about them, that people just think that if you got into it, you think you're going to make money. I spoke to someone the other day who's a 60-year-old, not ages, but someone who'd
mm,
retired, who said, if only I'd known about the city, like as in like finance and earning loads of money. And I kind of thinking, you've got it all wrong. Like you don't just walk into the city. I know nothing about the city,
mm,
but in bank and earn loads of money. If you're bloody good at something and you have initiative and you strive to find the way to do that, and if money is really important to you, work out in that gentleman's generation, speak to friends, network, find out where it is, and go and bloody do it. Exactly the same now. There's so many tools to work out where you can earn lots of money, but you've still got to be bloody good at it. Like, you can't just get into recruitment or sales and earn loads of money. So that's the number one thing. And number two thing, I think people who get into recruitment or sales to earn loads of money, especially recruitment actually,
mm.
I think could be successful for a year, but they'll get found out, and actually they'll have worse longer term careers in the game. I talked about being shit for 6 months. That was really useful because I was just trying to help people. Like, I couldn't quite
Mm.
understand. I wasn't trying to force someone into a job they didn't like.
Yeah.
They said no. They said no. But actually, those people still come back to me today. I'm such a believer that there's always an opportunity to, the commercial outcome will come. If you do a
Yeah.
bloody good job at anything, the commercial outcome will come. But people, as you say, will see through those people who say, no, you've got to take that job, or take that job for 6 months, then you can find something else. Actually, bollocks, absolute bollocks. Like, if you're going to try and hit your target year one, probably the right approach. If you're going to try and earn 300K in the next 3-4 years, you're so far left of center having that
Mm.
approach, I think. So
Yeah.
so yeah,
And
we're going to waste all the time on the first bloody question, or first,
it's often the way on this show,
yeah,
unfortunately. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
but no, it's a difficult one as well, right? Because you and I are very similar in respects that we want to help people, right? But if you're a recruiter in 2024, right, and you have a target to hit, and your goal is to help people be service led and all the rest of it, you have to. There's a really fine line between chasing your target, convincing the candidate to go to the interview, convincing the client to take the candidate, but also being very service led and offering a great service and all the rest of it. So it's very difficult. I think the one thing I've seen since I've set my business up is that recruiters will have the right perspective on it or whatever. They do want to do a good job by them, but then they realize that actually, it's a week before the end of the month and I haven't done a deal yet. I'm just gonna, or I haven't pulled a job. That's the one I see a lot. I haven't pulled a job, so they're gonna go for these really old school techniques. And don't get me wrong, some old school techniques work, but they'll do some sharky stuff to just try and get a job. Where my whole thing is, I don't want you to just pull 10 jobs. I want you to get half of those, but really good jobs, really good clients, which I guess could be a good segue actually into another topic here. Your clients, correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's a certain percentage you told me of the clients that continue to use you that you have retained. Obviously, they retained you to work them, and they've retained you to recruit for them. Let's talk about your first year then, because obviously it was just you. You weren't on the tools for how long? Like 2 to 4 years or something like that?
6 years, so quite a long time.
That's a very, very long time. And obviously, if I was to jump back on the tools, I'd train people how to do the basics. So it wouldn't be so difficult for me. But when you're trying to run a business and all the rest of it, and then going back to essentially being a recruiter, that's crazy. So how did you talk us through that year then? How did you actually do that? What was the sort of process and methodology for it?
It's a really good point. So I'll go into more detail there. One thing I want to say there, if you ever, as a business leader, whatever your bloody title is in recruitment, introduce yourself as this is my team, or I'm a MD or a founder. I've always been a recruiter. So I haven't recruited for 6 years, but I am a recruiter, and I'm so proud of being a recruiter. And that's why I want to change the perception of recruiter. Recruitment, I'm not a bloody founder. I don't have a team. We work together. It's our team, not my team. So I hate people that say that. That's such a bad. But yeah, you're right. 6.5 years not doing the job. I think I'm a bit of a spoiled brat. I think, and in terms of not wanting to work something. So your example there was no way I wasn't working something that wasn't retained. And I'm such a believer of taking the pain early. Like it might take 2 to 3 months to start building a pipeline. You might not have any roles to work. But actually, if you're good, you should still get a retainer or two in the first month, I think. Pure kind of my experience, and it's the only data that I can lean on for that kind of assumption. But retain everything. Like if I'm going to put work in, and you talk there about recruiters feeling like they need to convince people to do something. I've never felt like I've needed to convince people. We've never had a dropout. We've had 2 dropouts in interviews in 2 years, which is mad, because
that's crazy.
The stereotypical thing of recruitment of like contingent, got someone, fire them to the client as quickly as possible because someone else might send their CV. Like it's not necessarily conducive to actually providing a good service, or it's no surprise that people do drop out, or the candidate's not 100% bought in, or they go to sleep and wake up and think actually that opportunity that Charles or Calum really pitched me into probably isn't the right fit. So I think take the pain early. We really focused on retaining customers, really productize the service so they were actually getting something different. Purely if we're talking about someone who's going to start a one-man band or a small business, because that's something that I can kind of lean on. There is value of me actually running the search. Historically, I had, even though I wasn't on the tools, I would be an MD of a business, and I was frustrated that I couldn't work the roles because I cared winning the customer, and then you'd pass it to Gemma or Tom, who's 6 months into recruitment. Like that, they don't have the experience, the skills, the knowledge that kind of I have within the market. So really leaning on that. So productizing the service, the fact they are actually going to be working with me, and then making sure that it's the conscientiousness, really caring and putting yourself in both your customers and your candidate's shoes, and yet genuinely feeling like you're doing the right thing by them. So doing that consistently, finding a way to ask for. It's very kind of you to say I'm one of the nicest people in recruitment, and you could have talked about you talked about the need to hit target, or the kind of it's all good and well trying to serve someone, etc. You do need to have that killer instinct. If a conversation is going nowhere, being able to say, oh, are we going to do this or not? Or someone's really
Mm.
like pulling back on the retained side, just having a bit of like, oh, like just ruthlessness about you to say, are we completely wasting our time here? What is happening? I think that's a really powerful trait, and you still need elements of that, and you still need to ask people for favors to help. If you
Hmm.
ask people to help, they will help as long as you live up to the contract that you say to them. If you
Mm.
deliver a bloody brilliant service and you genuinely care, trust me, there are so many people that don't care. There's so many people that deliver shit services. They will try and help, but you've got to ask. You've
Yeah.
got to ask. You can't just place someone and then think that client's going to come back to you. Like there's got to be that constant communication, that constant value add
Mm.
of, hey Charles, saw this, thought of you. Or look, I'm absolutely delighted that we've been able to deliver this for you. Tell me three people within your network who we can help, and what's the best way to reach out to them.
Mm.
Keep peeling back that onion. Right, actually, Charles, it'd be worth reaching out to Charles. How am I best reaching out to Charles? Is there any way that you can make an intro there? Constantly ask that question until it's almost impossible not to get the intro. And then if you've qualified that well enough, and there is actually an opportunity with the person they've introed you to,
Mm.
it's going to be so easy and so much easier to charge something up front to get that business, because they they already have a trusted connection
Yeah.
who's used Zest, says we're great, and then it is compounding. Like it will snowball. So
Mm.
there was probably a load of stuff there, but the retain side is really important in order
Mm.
to kind of get stickiness and manage time.
So you were, correct me if I'm wrong, in year one when it was just you were 100% retained, right?
Apart from one customer, but it was a true exclusive relationship, and the only reason the majority of the businesses that we worked with were kind of scale up technology businesses. This
Yeah.
was a 1,000+ employee organization. It would have been
Okay.
impossible to get
Yeah, it's
um,
tough.
any kind of proper sign off, or it would have been too laborious for what it was worth. And I genuinely felt I'd qualified it to a strong enough standard, and we made over 100K out of that customer first year. So
Yeah, nice.
I don't want to poo-poo any kind of complete not retained stuff, but
Mm.
the qualification is the same.
Yeah, cool. So talk me through when you first set the business up, you have left your managing director role, you're now setting up Zest, you're by yourself, you haven't been on the tools, you haven't been BDing, you haven't been doing any of that type of stuff. What were the things you put in place to allow you to have such a successful year one? Because I know that you're really, really big and fantastic about branding, because I saw you all over LinkedIn before I even set the business up, and you were one of the first people I reached out to because of the branding stuff. But talk me through what you put in place to have that real successful year one when it was just you.
So it's a really good question. We were a allowed and a we and a enabled ourselves to productize the business early on. So
Mm.
we acted like a bigger business before we done or brought on a customer. I did put six figures of my own money in, so it wasn't necessarily needing customers in order to get money to pay suppliers, etc. Set up like a proper business, had a brand. I'm so passionate about what we do. I'm so
Mm.
myself that it's very easy just to talk about these things. But from day one, we tracked NPS. Day one, we tracked customer satisfaction, um, and that was really important on the journey. So we could productize the service, so anyone we spoke to felt like they were getting a zesty, completely different productized service. Um, we started off really talking and going at the brand side. I think that's probably my biggest strength in terms of actually cultivating a brand and doing something a bit different, but actually being able to generate money from that as well. And it's really funny. There's like we will probably just have made over £1 million in referrals and in 2 years. And I don't think it's that hard as long as you do the best by people. And well, one thing I will say, and this isn't actually, it's all about the mindset and the actual soft side is so much more important than other elements. And you're great at like actually devising and deriving a playbook that is unique to the business. There are so many SaaS businesses, so many recruitment businesses that put together a bloody playbook. But if everyone does that, then everyone's doing the same thing. Whereas actually just being a good human being, being authentically yourself, trying to help people, asking for favors, asking to pick people's brain, even if they can't use you to recruit. What do you think about the service? Would this be something that being obsessed with feedback? Is this something that you would use, even if you're an internal recruiter that's got no time or no sign off to use something? Meeting that person for a coffee, working out if it's someone that could give you some feedback that improves the product, asking for referrals there. So we kind of set up like a proper business early doors, productize the service, and ultimately we're able to retain sticky customers from day one. And we are there to solve a different problem to most recruiters, I think, as well. So we solve the more being able to assess people properly. There's so many people in sales recruitment, as you will know, having done it yourself, who might find a good person, but the candidates talked about football with the hiring manager for 45 minutes and they think they're a good match because they got on. Actually, being able to properly assess that person, use data as part of the assessment process. And 96% of our hires since launching Zest are in the role or promoted within 12 months. And in sales recruitment, that is bonkers. So being able to shout about that, being able to get referrals off the back of that has been such an important part of our journey.
Love that. Well, that was going to be the next thing I was going to talk about your approach to retainers, because working with a lot of different types of recruitment businesses, they like the idea of having money paid up front, but largely a lot of especially recruiters don't really see the value, because most recruitment companies offer their retained service, which is essentially the same as their contingent service, but I'm getting money up front. And it's difficult for me when I'm going in and trying to get people to pitch retainers and up the number of pitches and number of retainers that are sold, because what even is your product? When I worked in recruitment, my friend to this day, actually, Dan, he sold a retained project with a company, and we were doing a team build for them in the UK. So every aspect of the UK, we had to find them a sales rep. But they went through a platform. Back then we used iIntro, which don't know what it's like these days, but back then it was really, really good.
Yeah.
And we did like psychometric analysis as well. With the iIntro one though, you had to get the candidate to do like a video intro to themselves rather than like what you use with, I think it's Odro, right, that you use right now.
Yeah.
So I used Hinterview after, and I liked that. And then when we devised a few products, which I think is huge for business founders, managers, etc., like it's really important to productize your service. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult to pitch retainers. But eventually, we had a product very similar to yours, which had the McQuaig psychometric analysis. So we would do an analysis of the entire team, the management, and then we'd cross-reference that to applicants. We would do the first stage interview. So if you pay us up front, you don't need to do interview stage one. We will do that. You can look through it, and there's little parts where it's like first question, second question. So if you like what they say in the first 5 seconds, you don't need to watch the rest of it. You can go to the end of it. We managed the whole interview process. We made sure that they were aware of all their biases and all the rest of it, properly consult them. And for me and for my team, it was ludicrous for clients not to use that service and to not pay us up front. So I think anybody listening to this, watching this, that's considering going retained, or if you're a business owner and you want to devise something, fucking productize it. You need to have a product. And I get that like the videos and stuff might not necessarily work for specific sort of industries, but I still love it. I mean, if I was back in recruitment and I was going to go and do recruitment again, I would have to have that type of product to then take that to market.
It's bang on. We productize things from day one. And the best way to win retained business is get really good at saying no. It's exactly the same philosophy as why I was pretty crap for the first 6 months.
Mm.
It's just my style. I think so many recruiters use dating analogies all the time. It's like if you want to get married, stop saying yes to one night stands with everyone that approaches. That is what recruiters do, and that's why the stereotype to some degree is what it is.
Yeah.
It's like anyone who says yes to going on a date with them, they'll say yes, whereas actually try and work out exactly who you're trying to meet. And keep saying no, keep saying no, keep saying no, keep saying no, and you'll be funny how powerful saying no is. It's so because you're bang on. It's like that if a recruitment agency doesn't properly productize their retained service and they still will work contingent, then it's
What's
almost
the point?
impossible. It's like someone going into Louis Vuitton and wanting a bag, and the customer being like, "Well, I've only got 200 quid and the bag's 1,400. Oh, we'll give it to you anyway." Like, what the bloody? That's not how it works.
Just
Louis
devalues
Vuitton
it.
would say go next door to Next or whatever and buy a cheaper bag. Like, I think so many recruiters aren't selective of who they work with. They say yes to far too many people and end up wasting their time. Previously, our contingent fill rate was 20%. So I don't
That
see
doesn't
that as
surprise
like
me.
a bad number, but that means that 80% of my team's time at the time, and our team were wasting 80% of their time working roles that they were never going to fill. So instead,
Bonkers.
spend that 80% of time going out approaching people who you really want to work with, have something that's really compelling, be able to say no until there's the right opportunity. It's going to be far more fulfilling, the role. You're gonna be so much more excited about it, and actually it makes everything so much easier. If you're really selective and you win that dream client retained, the pitching process is so easy. You're not convincing
So
anyone to
easy.
do anything because I would work for any one of our clients, which is
Mm.
the best feeling. Whereas most recruitment agencies have that one or two clients that, yeah, we'll just get Joe Blogs down there because we need a quick fee. It just to me it's just madness, but it's how the industry's run for so long, so it's
Yeah,
quite
it
hard to
is.
comprehend, or like it is a tough challenge changing that perception and really moving the needle. But I feel that we're as an industry we're moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And with like all the different resources that are out there now and the different voices that are talking about the industry from a slightly more modern perspective, I would guess, the industry is certainly in a much better place than when I got into it, sorry, in 2014. It was very, very, very different. There's a few things you said there about the about pitching retained that I wanted to unpack because if I was a recruiter and I was like 21, 22 years old and I listened to you and I'm going, hang on a minute, this guy is saying say no more often. And I haven't pulled a job in the last 3 months. I've been really struggling. And now this guy's telling me to say no. I just wanted to unpack that. I get it because you may have already sort of covered this in terms of why you're saying no, but put yourself in the shoes of a young recruiter that's maybe below target right now and they've had a few client meetings and you're saying say no to them. Tell me a little
Yeah,
bit more about that.
it's it's all in the qualification. So I will never, in order to sell something, in order to sell that Louis Vuitton bag, I need to know that that customer wants an expensive bag. And
Mm,
ultimately, that's probably not an everyday purchase for them. So it's all a time-saving exercise for me. It's qualifying something, and it's qualifying something quickly and
mm.
knowing exactly where our worth is in comparison to our competitors. I got on a call the other day and or I just reframing the whole of recruitment, that most people will say on a cold call, and you'll get far more of this because training people, right, tell me why I should use Zest. I haven't got a bloody clue if you should use Zest. I genuinely haven't. I need to genuinely work out a few more reasons. And once I've done that, I will either tell you why you should use Zest, or I can recommend you to two or three of our biggest competitors who will be much better placed to help. And just cut
Fair.
that conversation so much shorter. Exactly the same if someone says, which has happened twice over the last 2 months. Yeah, well, I've already spoken to Joe Bloggs, so just so you know, we're seeing a few different options. Okay, that's great. I'm very different to Joe Bloggs, so I can hopefully educate you a wee bit more as to what we do in comparison to what they do. And I
Mm.
do know them well, and I'd actually recommend them for some sort of hires. But just so you're aware, if you did want to use a couple of agencies, that's going to completely rule us out the conversation. So are we best keeping this call going, or should we just call it a day? Like understanding where you actually fit, because reframing that, you'd be so interested, Charles, as to like most people are so used to like, oh no, no, no. Well, if you've spoken to them, I've got 10 things that actually are really bad about them. And if I could just talk through them and then maybe a few things as to why you should use Zest, maybe that's the best thing to do. Our competitors would not be in business if they weren't good businesses. There's so many recruitment businesses who are going under. So understanding where you fit, understanding where others fit is really important. But also being able to save that time, because if that customer did want to use a couple of agencies, again, I could qualify as to why. But instead of wasting that half an hour call, I've wasted 3 minutes, maybe
Mm.
five, because I'd want to know a bit more information. And then my time is really valuable. So then that 25 minutes, I can go out and scope out other opportunities. And again, it's not the end of the world if that person doesn't want to marry me, but it's given me more opportunities to go out and find the person who does.
And that is the killer mindset that I always say to people. If you have a conversation with a client, they've got jobs, and then they say to you, oh, we've got 5 other agencies we're speaking to, we're going to try and develop a PSL, and that's not your business model. Why are you wasting precious physical, like actual time and mental energy? Right, we've got to get a proposal together. The other agencies are in at 17%. Should we go in at 15? What are we doing? What are we
It's
doing?
madness.
You're
It's
better off
madness.
sometimes just saying no and saying, look, I don't think I can, this isn't the way that we operate. But if you are struggling, then come speak to us after and keep the relationship. If it's a company that's in your ICP, keep that relationship, offer them bits of value, socially touch base with them, call them on the phone, whatever. But yeah, I totally agree with you, and you've answered what I was going to say perfectly there. Because to be honest with you, looking back at when I was in recruitment, that's probably one of the things I wasn't so good at, of saying no. And I think that's maybe a typical thing for someone that's like 22, 23 years old that still lives at home with mum. Do you know what I mean? And wants to save money and wants to, get nice things in life, go on holidays, buy a house. So you're thinking, right, this is a tough spec. The client's a bit dodgy. Do I just take the job on anyway because I have a 50-50 chance of getting a fee and it's a decent one?
The best thing, one of the best things about being in recruitment, and one of the best things about needing to change the perception of recruitment is probably 90% of people think like that guy. So if you want to be different, if you want to be unapologetically yourself, if you want to be zesty different, then being like the 10% really works, because
Mm,
in most scenarios, yes, I would say no, but I'd genuinely be confident that we would be the best person to fill that opportunity. And giving it 2 weeks isn't going to do it like, even if it's a perfect ICP customer, it's not really going to do any. They're just going to waste their time. The customer's going to waste their time for two
hmm
weeks rather than me waste my time for
mm,
an hour or 2 weeks. Like, okay, speak to that guy who's at his mum's house, desperate to make money. He'll probably send you some really poorly qualified CVs because you've given the job to 5 different agencies and you're expecting someone amazing. I'll then come in after that, and then boy, will we look completely different to that person. But I do know exactly what you mean in terms of it is really difficult to say no, and it's something that we get as well. By the way, still the vast majority of our business has come through me, and our team will struggle to generate enough conversations to win enough retained business. They still win it, and they're still phenomenal at what they do. But like, I completely get it, but
mm.
saying yes to business that isn't in your space is not the answer.
Yeah.
Getting better at the job, setting up more conversations, qualifying better, building your brand, building why you are genuinely the best in your space is a
Mm.
far better use of your time. And you will get to a stage where people come to you and people want to work with you. And I think that needs to be more of a recruitment type conversation.
Yeah.
It's funny how many recruitment agencies do you know that say, "Oh, we've got some capacity at the moment." Every recruitment agency thinks they've got capacity and they'll take on
Yeah.
as much business as they want. Being able to stop and say, actually, we don't have capacity at the moment. You're going to have to come back in a couple of weeks.
Mm,
But it's powerful.
it is powerful.
It's
I,
really powerful.
I had a guy on my team, Oscar. He was probably one of the best resources I've ever met. He was very, very detail orientated and just so good with people, just so good with candidates. Like we made a bit of a joke because he could get a candidate to accept a job that was 20K less because he understood their need so much, their reason for leaving. He qualified them, and there was like a running joke because it was like 5 placements in a row where he got a candidate less than what they were on, but he's still done a phenomenal job. But something that I installed in my team, and this is when I became a manager and I'd done lots more in the retained stuff, not when I was early 20s, was that if the customer doesn't value our service, doesn't believe in what we do, like we believe in what we do, turn them to one of our competitors. And at the time, other managers were like, "You're mental." And I'm like, "No, I'm not mental because I've probably got a 15 to 20% chance of filling that job. And it's not really the most exciting job. It's not really a great company in the space. Our competitors can work that because at the moment we've got 15 to 20 clients that we're working with that trust us so much that they pay me a quarter of the fee up front. And there's videos to this day on YouTube of me interviewing hiring managers and posting that all over LinkedIn. And people would be DMing the hiring manager, recruiters would be specking CVs to the hiring manager. Do you really think for a minute that hiring manager is going to look at CVs from other recruiters when she's been on YouTube with her exclusive retained recruiter? Of
No
course not.
chance.
Of
No
course
chance. No
not.
chance. And if you manage the recruitment process correctly, they should be sending you those direct applicants because you should be adding a significant amount of value, and they should be using you to benchmark those individuals. But it's yeah, it's a broken it's broken in a lot of sort of perspectives, recruitment in that sense. But look, there's a space for everyone. There's actually a space for contingent recruiters as well, and
Mm,
um, I'll never not see the worth. It's just a completely different. It's a completely different game to what we do or what I would be good at. Again,
yeah,
compete against people at the sport that you want to compete at. Control
yeah.
what you can control. Control the controllables. There's no point me, who's a great basketball player, competing against someone who's a footballer. Like it's completely different games, contingent and
Yeah.
retained. And again, going back to things, you still need to be bloody good at what you do. And I'm pretty old school, but I will still say the best thing, my best trait is I will work harder than anyone else I know. So, like, even if you've got the skill, even if you've nailed the pitch, there's still it's all the soft elements that really make you and what you're doing. I think, but
Mm.
again, you'll be a great person to speak of that.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing that I say to founders and business owners all the time now is that A, I'm not a magician, and B, I don't really necessarily know whether you can teach work ethic to people. I don't really think you can. I've been really pondering this and losing sleep over this because when I look back to when I was a recruiter and a manager and now obviously running my business, I wouldn't say that I'm the hardest worker in the world. I'd say actually, deep down, I take shortcuts sometimes and I would just say I wouldn't necessarily say I'm the hardest worker. I work a lot smarter and I work in sprints and I'm very efficient in my sprints and I would do a lot more than most people. But when I work with people and I deliver a fantastic training session and I'll do some coaching, I always say to people, it doesn't matter whether my training's good or not. You have to put the bloody reps in. You could go and work with a boxing coach, and they are known for teaching Floyd Mayweather his famous jab. And you could learn that, but if you don't practice it and you don't put the rounds in it and you don't get out of your comfort zone and go and spar with boxers that are better than you, you'll never get good. You'll never do well. And that's something that I see a lot with recruitment companies is, you'll do a training session on selling retainers and then you go and check in on them every single week. How many times have you got in front of a customer to pitch retained? Oh, I haven't. Why? I'm just not really getting them. Like, do more. Just do more. Create a
Yeah.
list. Just speak to more people. Like, there's something that you said, a few months back that I took on board. Like the last few months, I've been on a massive BD drive. I'm fucking good at BD. If I get in front of people, I'm very confident I can convert them. But I wasn't speaking to enough people because of my capacity. I was on site 3 days a week and all the rest of it. So I just took what you said, and you were like, I aim to meet one new person every week for a coffee. So I just wrote up on my board for Q3 every single week, aim to meet one person in person or for a virtual coffee. And every single week, it helps with the podcast because people go, "Oh, I'll talk about myself."
Yeah.
But it's literally just been a case of just one net new person every single week, and then you can refine your pitch, then you can refine your questions and all the rest of it. So it's hard though, isn't it? Trying to tell people to do more, especially if you're running a business as well. Not everyone's going to work the way you work, but it's a hard one.
Yeah, yeah, and one of my things, I put too much down to hard work. So I certainly would work harder than smarter, and it's quite hard to. It's like a blessing and it's a curse. It's the best. It's my biggest strength. It's my biggest weakness, really, and
Mm,
it's trying to balance it all. But it's yeah, I think everything I've said in regards to that kind of the earning piece, the the retain piece is all having a longer term viewpoint of recruitment as your career, being able to defer gratification, being able to defer that kind of quick term place someone today.
mm,
Actually, I think if you have that long term approach, you're going to sort of develop a really successful career in recruitment. But as you say, it's still making sure that you drive yourself out of your comfort zone as much as you possibly can. I'm probably not allowed to say this anymore, but make me sound like a proper granddad. But when I was first in recruitment, I used to try and do 10 things before nine that make me really anxious.
like
Because
what?
so like all the stuff that you just don't want to do. If you put off giving bad news,
Mm,
making a cold call to someone who you got shouted at last week or whatever.
yeah,
Like it doesn't necessarily need to be 10, but I think all success comes from failure and all success comes from doing stuff that you really don't want to do. And
so
I think
true.
it's so easy to, and the longer your day goes on, the reason I did it in the morning, the longer your day goes on, the more you put it off. And then you
Put it
think
off.
after 12, you're kind of thinking, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow." But if you do it first thing, nearly all the time you realize, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Or guess what? I got a big sort of nugget of success out of that
Mm,
conversation. I'm going to do more of that. And then you drive yourself to kind of spend more time in discomfort and drive yourself to spend more time in that kind of horrible, anxious growth
mm.
type feeling. I think the more you can do that,
Oh,
the
100%.
better you'll be.
100%. I've tried to give recruiters homework since I've set the business up. I don't like to use the term homework because that gives me PTSD from my terrible years in school. But what I do
Yeah.
say to people, and I say this like, look, outside of today and outside of my contracted hours with you, you don't have to do this. Okay, you don't have to. That's my preface. But if you really, really, really want to be successful in this job and you want to be a top biller, or you just want to be a 100, 200K biller, be a profitable person and enjoy your life, right? I want you to go and do one thing a week that scares the living crap out of you. Go and do something after work, before work that you really don't want to do, right? When I first started, when we had the product for the retainer, I'd never been to a conference before by myself, right? And I got invited to, I think it was like it was like a Royal College of like gynecology and obstetrics, right? There was like 10 stands, and every single person there was like a VP or a director or a CTO or whatever. I was a bloody trainee recruitment consultant by myself, right? I built a relationship. The client got me a free ticket, and I had my little iPad mini with like the little pitch deck on it. And I pitched it to every single person and got brutally rejected by every person, including my own client, by the way, who said no one in this industry will pay you up front. It's just not, no other recruitment company would do this. And I remember like on my way home, I was like 50-50. In my mind, I was proud that I still done that and I pitched it. And even though I got rejected, the other part of me was like, fucking hell, man, you're shit at your
Yeah,
job, isn't
yeah.
you? Like you pitched it, you didn't get one bit of interest. Everyone just laughed you out the door, man. Fucking hell. But I came into the office the next day and thought, fucking hell, that was so hard. And I just felt like I grew so much from that. And I was like, right, I probably just went straight in for the kill, didn't ask any questions. What questions can I ask? Right, let's speak to some people in the office and see what questions they ask to really understand what their pain points. Right, let's speak to candidates and clients and understand what the pain points are in the industry to see, because this might not have been relevant because they were all bigger companies. And then from that experience, I no longer had a fear of pitching to strangers and or a fear of speaking to VPs because I got so wildly out of my comfort zone that it just absolutely propelled me.
It's great. All of those things will be the best things you've ever done. And it's that objection or that I love that oh, no one will ever pay you up front or we've never done this before is such a great objection because actually that's what drives you to get out of your comfort zone. That's what drives you to push things forward because just because someone's never done it is probably more of a reason as to why they should, but there needs to be a reason. You still need to people charge it, we charge a third up front, but we've got to be worth it. That's
Yeah.
really important as well. And there's got to be a reason why they're doing it. It can't just be because you get to work with a founder and I'll put in a little bit more time and resource. Or I saw the other day someone out of hours sourcing. What does that mean? Like
You mean just a regular recruitment
yeah,
consultant? No.
exactly. Like after this call at 6 o'clock, I'm going to do only the work for when I'm exhausted for my retained customers because it's mad.
Oh,
But
that's wild.
yeah, that's a great story, and you'll learn far more than that than if you'd said no to going to that conference and just
Yeah.
sat in the office doing sort of typical day-to-day stuff.
Well, fun fact, you'll like this before I move on to the final two things. That company ended up going retained with me, right? So the reason why they did, and you'll love this because it's exactly what you offer. I ended up placing a guy in the southwest of the UK. I think I remember his name, doesn't matter. And I think he quit after 3 months or something like that. And we basically said the reason why that was is we qualify the candidates, we try and match them to what you're looking for, and then essentially what we do is we pass that on to you. And then the rest of the interview process is done by yourself, and we manage that process. We manage what their need is, the salary expectations, etc. It turns out that actually what you're looking for is a specific personality type. And the fact that I think it was to do with the candidate being afraid of getting out of his comfort zone. He worked for a big corporate. He's now working for a tiny startup, but he had sold very similar products. That's why. So a lot of companies will just hire someone. They will hire a tech recruiter because they were successful in a big tech recruitment firm. It's yeah. So I
Yeah,
basically said to them, like, look, what we'll do is we'll give you a discounted rate on our retained service. All you need to do is just pay us a small fee up front. We usually charge at 30%. He was like, oh my God, 30%. I was like, look, just we'll do it at the current rate, but you've got to pay me a little bit of money up front. And then for every candidate, we will do the first stage interview for you. And we'll also do a psychometric analysis of you, your VP, the directors, all the other managers, and then we'll cross-reference it. We ended up sending 3 candidates. He was so blown away by all 3 candidates. They all matched on the psychometric analysis. He came back to me and was like, you've only sent me 3. I shared him my screen and I was like, I've screened 50 fucking people. He was like, oh, right, okay. You only see the surface. You don't see what's underneath this. All cross-reference checked, everything like that, done all the references for them. They hired someone. That person then stayed for their business until they were eventually bought by a massive enterprise a couple of years later. So it just goes to show you that even that customer that said, I'm never going to work with you, retain, no one in this industry does, ended up seeing the value in the end because there was a pain point.
yeah, well, it's so true. One of my big things that I want to do in my career in recruitment, and I'm going to give this away here. If I could do 100%, I'd love to do it, but I think at least over 50%. I'd love to charge 100% of someone's basic salary as the fee, um, because I genuinely believe it's worth it for the right individual.
Mm,
If you're gonna, again, it's how you do that, and if the person's got to be there for a number of years, and you've got to be able to guarantee a certain degree of that. But I just think the recruitment industry is flawed in so many ways, as I say, because of the commercial kind of relationship of only really being incentivized to keep someone there 3 months. If you can find someone who stays with the business for a long time, boy, it's cheap. Boy, recruitment is cheap. Whereas I used to think we should walk around with swag bags, like after charging a 30K fee. Actually, that money is the best money you will ever spend because people are the most important people to your business or the most important element to your business if they're right and if they stay and if they perform. We can
100%.
control elements of that through the assessment process, but you've got to trust us in order to kind of do it. But look, conscious of
100%.
time.
Yeah, no, me too. Last thing I'll ask you before I finish off with the last question, because we haven't got to that yet, but maybe if we want to do it in a snappy way, what would you say were 3 to 5 things in the last 2 years since setting up your business that have been like the biggest lessons that you've learned? Or maybe even like if you were to go back in time and be a mentor to yourself when you set Zest up, what would be 3 to 5 biggest lessons that you learned in the last 2 years?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I I think it's been a lot harder than I thought it would be. Being MD of a 20 something person company in a good market, um, with an established brand is far easier. And actually, I think we've done a really good job with the brand, and I really appreciate the feedback that you've given through this conversation in regards to the brand. So we've probably got a bit of a head start there, but it's still hard. Understanding understanding that and not being, because there's so much time that you kind of feel you want to give up, or it's tough. And I'm saying this from a position of ridiculous privilege, where actually we've been profitable pretty much every month, and we've managed to grow sustainably through this period. So I think if I was to go back, I'd say it's been far tougher than I think. Personally, I would spend more time. So you say, I spend more time networking. So I spend a lot of time networking, and now I try and do one coffee a day, which is a lot of time, but it's one of the best things I'll do. I think there's far more of that I can do, and I really enjoy it. It's what gives me
Mhm.
energy. It's what leads me to kind of the next conversation, leads me to really exciting conversations, leads me to really exciting opportunities. I think personally, as a third point, I wouldn't have taken such a step away from the coal face. I kind of
Mhm.
did a really hard job first kind of 16 to 18 months, and then took a step back thinking actually we've
Mm.
got this to a size where it's a bit more sustainable. And I think however much you don't want to be important, I think it's important to be humble. I think it's really important not to let your ego get carried away, but still understanding how important the founder is in a business of under 10 people, and not being scared of that, not being frustrated by that, but just leaning into it and enjoying the conversations, because I love the conversations that I get to
Mm.
have every day. Um, but I think it's yeah, sometimes you can think, oh, it's really frustrating that I'm still liable and responsible for the new business, but actually it's the way you frame things. I think it's also such a privilege that I'm in that position. And I think to counter that point, I could probably be kinder to the team in terms of playing to our strengths and operating that in a sensible way. I think I was such a believer of everyone should be 360, and everyone's won their own customers. Everyone's done a really good job there, but I do think we could lean into a little bit more around playing to our strengths and operating in a way that actually feels super collaborative and
Mm.
allows people to bounce out of bed every morning, whilst understanding what you said about the conference. Like your strengths will be the things that you do the most
Mm.
reps in. So if you start just sourcing, or you start doing something else, or you stop doing new business, you'll think new business won't be your strength. I didn't bill for 6.5 years. I can do new business. I don't actually think it's my strength. I just do it more than anyone else
Mm.
in our team, so I'm good at it. But I think if you kind of do that regularly, I think you will be good at it. And the final point, I'm such a believer of this. It's really tough. It's the reframing of
Mm.
everything to think I get to do this, not I have to do it. Like I'm such a believer of that. Like everything, I get to go to this networking event because I've been invited, and what a bloody privilege! I get to run a business. I don't have to do this. I could shut down Zest anytime, but it's such an important philosophy, and I think from a well-being perspective, I think it's so healthy to do that, because I think in the world that we live in, it's so easy to be overwhelmed and so stressed, which leads to anxiety and a whole host of feelings, which I have felt before, which are horrible and
Mm.
debilitating and paralyzing. But I think if you think I get to do this, it's the world is amazing. I'm so unique in that kind of. I think I'm probably one of the only people that feel like that. But I get to go for a run in the morning. I get to come to the office. I get to do all these incredibly exciting things. I get to have challenging conversations. Like it's if you view things like that, you will be zesty. You will bounce from one thing to another, and it'll be a wonderful journey. But I think, as you will find, Charles, as well, you'll be great to think and feel about it. It's so easy to think the other way. Oh, I've
Mm.
got to do my VAT. Oh, I've got to, because I've got that meeting I've got to sort that troubleshooting issue for the candidate that might not accept that job offer. But just flip it all on its bloody head. You get to do all these things. You're ridiculously lucky. And if you view things like that, I do think luck will find you. And naturally, your billings will improve as a result of that.
Mate, honestly, beautifully put. The last thing I'll say before I ask you the final question is Tony Robbins. I got this quote from Tony Robbins that the only antidote or the best antidote for fear and anger, two of the most destructive, if not the most destructive emotions, is gratitude. So if you're waking up in the morning and like you said, you've got to do your VAT return or you have to have that conversation where you got to let that candidate down or whatever it might be, if you just reframe it to I get to do that, right? And like you said, you get to go and run in the morning. I personally, I enjoy aspects of running and I hate aspects of running, but I say I get to run because I've had debilitating injuries before where I wasn't able to run, right? So we could talk about that forever.
But you're so right there, and it's I will also stress. I've been in. It's funny how both of those feelings are compounding.
Mm,
If you've got negative thoughts running through your head, it's very easy to catastrophize, and then it's very easy for that catastrophizing to turn into mega like stress, panic attack, and
hmm.
I've been there as well. But if you go the other way, it's funny if you look for it. How many? And it might sound a bit like LA, and a bit like Hollywood, but if you look for it, there are so many things in this conversation, anything that you're able to do that is just joyous and amazing, and we're so lucky to do what we do.
Love it. So, final question I always finish the show with following today's episode, how do people in recruitment get 1% better?
Um, Reps really. What they want to be doing, but reps in things they haven't done before, ideally. Reps in challenging themselves both in and out the office. I will also stress that. Like I'm such a believer. You're talking about running. You're talking about not being able to do that at times. I've had a couple of knee ops. Like doing things that are out of your comfort zone that push you, really teach you about yourself and how hard you can drive your body, your mind, everything. So being able to do more reps in things that you don't do and constantly look to improve and bespoke to me, Charles, I guess. And we didn't talk about this too much. Um, Understand where your brand fits and understand where you fit. And from as a person, be 100% yourself. Be really, really proud of who you are and take that into every conversation because recruitment is like life. Like if you've got no mates and your family hate you and you're single and you're miserable, maybe don't be yourself or look at yourself and how you are. But most people have wonderful social lives, people that love them, and then they go to work and they change who they are to fit in with that
Mm,
recruitment
I see it all
stereotype.
the time.
Guess what? If you're yourself, you will draw, shine a light on that. Do what you're doing. Put yourself out there. Put yourself out there. LinkedIn, TikTok, socials, coffees, networking. Could be social media. It doesn't need to be. You don't need to be some sort of YouTuber. Put yourself out there, but make sure it's you're putting yourself out there with, and you will find like-minded customers. But it takes a lot of reps. It takes a lot of doing that, and a lot of
rejection, really, in order to
Mm.
get to kind of reap the reward.
Mate, I love that. That's one of my favorite answers that I've got from the final question that I always ask people. And it's so reassuring to hear from someone like you, because I get asked by like my friends who obviously have me on LinkedIn, and they're like, mate, you're so active on LinkedIn. You're pretty out there on LinkedIn. And I'm like, the thing is I've tried the whole being other people, and I've had people talk to me about the podcast and saying, do you know what you should do, Charles? You should do this and you should do that. And I'm like, do you know what? Nah, I'm gonna do it my way. I'm gonna do it the Charles way, because there's no one else on LinkedIn that's doing it my
Good.
way. They might be doing something similar, sure, but I think everyone in this world, and I think Chris Williams said this. I was listening to his podcast with Brett Weinstein recently, that everyone has a unique take on life, and people deserve to listen to their unique takes. And I think there was a quote somewhere that said one of the greatest like catastrophes in life is that people will die and no one would have heard their voice. And that for me is a really like, it's quite a deep sort of thought to have, that you might say things, but really you haven't actually spoke your voice and your opinion.
There's so much on that. I think, and I'm quite unique, and maybe especially in the recruitment world, I think you learn how not unique you are or how similar you are by speaking. You
Mm,
share something that no one else is sharing about feeling really shit that day, because not everyone says they're wonderful, everyone says they're good when they're asked
mm,
that way. And you work out how many people also feel that exact same way. But I tell you what, everything links through this conversation, which is interesting, and it's just naturally followed this path. It's all about deferring gratification, having a long-term approach on things, because you will get. I don't know about you, but when I first started doing LinkedIn videos 6 years ago, I got 5 prank calls a day with people being like this posh accent, like pretending to have jobs, and like just and every group chat that I was in, all my mates were just thinking, "What the bloody hell is he doing?" But understanding, if you think that is what you want to be doing, you think that's a nice way to get out of your comfort zone, share your message. Bloody hell, made £500,000 in a first year of business because I did all of those reps of doing all that shit that I really didn't want to do, that led to me being tormented in group chats, etc. It will be exactly the same for those people you're talking about who have to say no to business to get retained. Their
mm,
boss will go into them, and again, it's difficult because you have to work for the right business. But their boss will go and say, "Charles, you haven't won a job." Oh well, I'm only going to be working retained work. You've still got to put the reps in, but you
mhm,
will get tormented for the first couple of months, and then maybe it's the arrogant, maybe confident side of me. I'd be confident that I'd be better than my boss within 3 to 9 months, because I've said no to business that they've said yes to, and
mm.
I'm starting doing 30K fees. But it's all linked to deferring gratification. It's all linked to putting up with that shit for the first 2 months when nothing's going right, putting up with the prank calls, putting up with the crap messages in a WhatsApp group. It's but it's all linked to also being 100% unapologetically you.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it, mate. Awesome. Honestly, we could probably carry on for the next hour, but it is now 5:45 on a Tuesday evening, and yeah, we've got lives to live and whatnot. But honestly, Callum, I cannot say how grateful I am. Speaking of gratitude, to have you on the show as one of the early guests, it's been a pleasure. I've realised I've been saying this after pretty much every episode recently, but I'm sure people will come away 1% better off. Fantastic, but I'm sure people will learn a lot. But I'm just learning so much about people, recruitment, business, and life after every single episode. And I'm sometimes forgetting that this is going out to people to listen to. When you're saying
That's
about
the best
being
way to.
authentic and stuff, I'm like, I click end record and I'm like, do you know what? Down the line, probably hundreds of people will listen back to this. It's crazy to think.
Well, it's exactly my philosophy about why I have one coffee a day. I don't record it, but it's exactly the same conversation. None of the time I'll talk about tech sales or what we recruit for. Really, what you do is you learn that people are far more similar than
Mm,
you think, and there's tons of ideas that come from conversations. The pity of life, as you say, is so many people live and never let people know their voice, or never have the conversations in the first place. But it takes a little bit of getting out there in order to have conversations like this, and everyone can have them. Trust me, everyone can. You don't need to record them. Go for a coffee, speak to people out your circle, and you'll learn so much, honestly. But thank you. Excited to see how this podcast develops, and yeah, really appreciate you making time.
Nice one. Thank you very much. Final thing to finish off the show, anybody that is looking to speak to Calum, reach out to him on LinkedIn. I don't know if you're still hiring, but you will be obviously hiring. I've worked with Calum and Zest for a number of months. One of the best companies that I have worked with. Obviously, from listening, if you've listened to the end of this show, you'll realize that Calum genuinely is one of the nicest people in the recruitment industry. So if you're interested in speaking to Calum about working with him, just reach him on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you for watching or listening.
Perfect. Thanks, Charles.